broadcasting live from unknown remote locations and not their parents' basements. It's B2B Tonight with Ryan O'Hara and John Mazza, featuring Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast and author of Zero Time Selling, and Rich Stone, VP of Sales at Tech Target. And now, everybody welcome our host, Ryan O'Hara.
Hey everyone, welcome to B2B Tonight in August. If you watched last month's episode, you're probably noticing that I'm wearing the same shirt. I'll let you go back and look at that episode if you didn't see it. But I just needed to get that out there. We had to get the awkward elephant room out of the room here, and that's what we've done. As usual, I have John Mazza with me. What's up, John Mazza?
Ryan, you got to go through the archives and make sure you're not wearing the same outfit. That's what I do before every episode.
Is that why you're doing the cool guy entrepreneur thing with like the sports team shirt and then the sports coat but no dress shirt underneath?
Yeah. I mean, that's, half the time. Yeah, last time I wore a turtleneck, so I wanted to, bring it down a notch.
Yeah, you were cosplaying as Steve Jobs.
Yes.
For some housekeeping items before we get into this, I know that's like the cliche thing. You probably have a webinar bingo square and you're circling off housekeeping items. There is a recording of this that will be sent out. I'm thinking it'll probably be sent out on Friday. So we want to give us a day to edit this stuff and cut it down and edit out all the swears that Rich and Andy are probably going to say in this episode, because you know how those guys get sometimes. And we'll email you out a recording for that. If you want to share this with anybody or anything, we do a B2B Tonight every month. It's usually really exciting. Before we get started, though, we always do a little thing, a little bit of a bit, I'm removing the fourth wall a little bit. We try to show off some cool stuff that we've been doing in the prospecting lab. Mazza, what happened 2 weeks ago when you worked on what we're going to talk about today?
You're right. We definitely did get into the prospecting lab. We talked with our sales team. We got a bunch of our top tier accounts that we wanted to break into, and they wanted our help to make some cool videos for them and use our creative minds on the marketing side to make some cool videos for them. And I got a little bit nostalgic and set up a green screen in my basement and had some fun.
So before we get into this, I just want to explain the context of what we're about to see. John made several prospecting videos for target accounts, and you did a very similar idea for every target account you went after, right, John?
Yep.
If you're a team right now, the theme of this episode is really helping people with turning around their sales team. If you're struggling, campaigns like this can actually be really cool. But the important part is you don't want to do one-offs. In fact, we did a Vidyard webinar last month with Tyler Lassard from Vidyard, where we talked about this. Let's roll one of the clips and see what you did.
See it.
Let's play. Yeah, what do you want to play?
Highland. Let's start off with Highland, and then work our way down. So Highland Software.
Commercial produced by LeadIQ and a sad attempt to prospect the Highland sales team. The branding, pitch, and video were strictly made without the notice, consent, or awareness of Highland. LeadIQ apologized in advance for what you're about to see. Highland did not ask us to make this. We don't blame them.
Are you afraid nobody's gonna see your company's content in the yellow pages? Nervous your faxes have just ended up in the shredder? Digital transformation is more crucial now than ever before in the history of humankind. In order to modernize your processes, you'll need secure access to complete information, intelligent automation, agile adaptivity, expertly tailored services. Highland has what it takes to help you get the job done, where and how you prefer. Highland. Discover the value of a modern, cloud-first approach to content services.
So the key there, it seems like you're trying to channel your little like cheap lawyer commercial there for Highland, right?
Yeah, definitely. Watched a lot of late night cartoons, TV, whatever, USA, and seeing those lawyer commercials back in the 90s were kind of what sparked a little bulb in my brain.
So the way this is working is our SDR team is now emailing this to people at Highland and using LinkedIn InMail and some other stuff, and they send that to them and tell them we made them a ridiculous video for them, like we made a little ad, and they just like they can't deal. Let's play another one. You want to do one more? Want to show another one, Mazza? Which one do you want to do?
Yeah, let's do VMware.
Okay.
The following is an infomercial produced by LeadIQ and a sad attempt to prospect the VMware sales team. The branding, pitch, and video were strictly made without the notice, consent, or awareness of VMware. LeadIQ apologized in advance for what you're about to see. VMware did not ask us to make this. We don't blame them.
Are you looking to own your path to the future? VMware unlocks the power of technology by connecting its complex components so you can create better experiences for your people. Don't settle for complex data center solutions that bleed your wallets dry. You need future-ready technology that simplifies your infrastructure and protects your bottom line. VMware, realize what's possible. Yeah!
I can't wait for VMware to email us back and say, please take us off your list. That's good, Malza. Did you rip your jacket? I didn't notice you're not wearing the blue jacket today. Is because you ripped it when you did that flex at the end?
Yeah, but I can sew, so I've already patched it back up.
So we told you guys to give you some nuggets and some tips today. First tip we're going to give you today to turn around your sales team is if you feel like you're in a rut, maybe do a creative prospecting campaign like this. We did this for, I think, but there's literally like 10 of these. It's crazy how many we made, but it took us about 3 or 4 hours to film them all, and then it takes us about a week to edit it. And now we're prospecting these people. We'll probably hear back from 30 or 40% of them with an actual meeting secured. And the other cool part is they're viral. So like you share one, they send it to everybody on the team. And then when we're in the middle of a deal, everybody on the team will know like who LeadIQ is already. So check it out. If you want us to make one for your company and you think that you'd be a good target account, maybe hit us up after.
Don't be so humble, Ryan. We're expecting to hear back from like at least 80% of them. Come on.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. We've done it in the past. We usually hear back from like 70 or 80, but I want to be, I know, come on, let's be honest, audience. You guys aren't going to do it like that, right? That you have some shame. All right, let's get to our show. So our first guest today, what we're going to do is we usually start with one guest while the other guests come out in a couple minutes. Our first guest, let me tell you about this guy. Many years ago, I was hanging out with Phil Gerbyshack, and he told me that if there's one guy that I need to get connected with in the sales world, his name's Andy Paul. Andy is the host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, which he's hosting in conjunction with Ring DNA. He has written many books. He's got some stuff in the works too that we might talk about, but he's the author of Zero Time Selling. Everyone say hi to Andy Paul. Andy, what's up?
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Hey,
yeah.
Jonathan.
Hey. You're officially in the hot box. That's why the fire's on deck here.
The fire's on deck, yeah. It's hot enough here.
So Andy, you literally you're basically a student of the game when it comes to sales. You have a crazy background. You've run sales teams before. You've had exits. Like literally you had a company you worked for that got exited and got acquired by Netgear and stuff. For you happen to be someone that's had to turn around sales teams before. And so I thought you'd be a really good person to talk to about like, what starts this? What starts a company getting in a rut on with like struggling on a sales team?
Yeah, lots of reasons why companies lose the recipe. Oftentimes it wasn't a very good recipe to begin with. Yeah, there's a certain amount of randomness to some of that. But I found that when I joined a company and we're looking at turning around a sales team, it starts with the people. And oftentimes there's a big disconnect between management's understanding what's really motivating people and driving people and what's really their motivation is. So for me, it's really digging in with individuals. One of the steps, digging in with individuals and finding out what's the most important thing for them, right? What's the most important thing in their life and how can I help them get that? How can I help them achieve that? And so start that as a base because it's easy enough to point the fingers at people, that individuals for not getting the job done. But it's in my experience, it's rarely the case that it's the individuals. It's more often starts with management.
So if someone's not motivated, the key thing is you have to find some sort of motivation to dig them in and make them want to actually do stuff. Some of the people watching this are probably reps, actually. Like they're people that might be listening to this. If you're struggling as a rep, what are some ways that you can find motivation? Like what are some examples of good motivation maybe?
Well, I think motivation's intrinsic, right? Not extrinsic. I don't think it's something you acquire. I think you have it internally. But people, you really need to know as a manager, which is the thing that is motivating them, right? Is it purely, hey, I need to make some money. Hey, I'm trying to learn something interesting. I'm trying to grow into a job, be able to sell bigger deals. You need to understand what that is for the person, for the individual. And chances are that's just wasn't being aligned before with the manager. They weren't paying attention to it. Sometimes you'll get people just aren't motivated and they need to go pursue their career elsewhere. But oftentimes people are with the right feeling of support, they can achieve much more than they have before.
Do you have any stories that you can think of where like you had someone that just was bummed out and not motivated and you're like, hey, what happened? You're not doing your activity goal or you're not, Like, do you ever?
I mean,
well, how's that go usually?
Well, I mean, I had, guys, years ago, I had a guy who was basically been bounced around from department to department, and I was the new kid on the block, so they gave him to me. Yeah, everything sort of flows downhill, as you know. And I thought, well, here's a smart guy, but he's just not connecting with the work. He's not. He had done well previously in another job at the company, and just lost it somehow. And it's just taking it back to basics with him and helping him every step of the way. It's just understanding what his process was, how I could help him. Again, understanding what was really lacking in terms of maybe how he was disconnected from what his motivation was, and how to get him reconnected with that. And if you have a little patience and support for people, and you don't focus just exclusively on the metrics, you give people some time and support. Yeah, you're surprised people can turn around. This guy, in his case, he turned around and became one of our top sellers. It took 8 months. Yeah, he'd been on a PIP for a while there, but that motivated him. And I won't say, extra special manager, but he just needed that personal attention.
So the personal attention stuff, this rep, it's a great story, by the way. Everyone likes a comeback story. You helped them turn around things. What did the PIP look like? Because I feel like one of the things I've always noticed is like a PIP is almost like quicksand, right? Like you get in a rut, then you get put on PIP, and then you just sink. And the more you move and the more you panic, it impacts how you actually are in your cold calls and cold emails, and how you are in your deals. You're like kind of desperate, like, right. Hey, look, you got to do this, please.
Well, it was interesting. So in his case, it was actually a matter of almost giving him more autonomy, right? Letting him feel more sense of agency over the choices he's making in terms of the accounts he was going to call on, the types of product mix he was going to sell. And that made a big difference for him, because before he'd been very directive. The previous manager he worked on, here's your patch of accounts you're going to call on. It was not by geographic, but it's just an account list. And I don't know, it didn't seem to jive with him for some reason. So we said, well, if that's not working for you, let's take another look at it. What would you like to do? Right? And we had the ability to provide him that flexibility, and that made all the difference. And I think this is one of the things that's, see consistently over and over and over again is the more prescriptive you become as a manager, and the less sense of agency your sellers feel they have in the choices they're making in terms of working their deals and their accounts, then performance is going to suffer.
Yeah, it really makes sense. It's like, it depends on the manager too. If you're on a PIP and your manager just says, hey, here's this PIP. If you don't, perform better or at these numbers, then you're fired. Or you can have somebody that actually works with you and works you through that process and how to get better.
Yeah, I mean, I was in one start where I took over a sales team, and there were 5 people on the team, and I'd been working with them for a few weeks to see what the problems were, see how I could help, sort of get people going, because they'd really stalled out. They had a couple of years of good growth and stalled out. And sometimes the heavy hand of the PIP works the way you want it to. And in this case, what I did is I was having a hard time sort of capturing their attention and the sense of urgency that they needed to have. So one day, sort of frustrated, I went home and put them all on a PIP and came in the next day and did it individually for all 5. And, over the course of the next 3 or 4 months, 3 of them left. But the 2 people that stayed sold more than they had sold the 5 of them combined by a multiple of, because again, we got them fixed, fixed on a plan that they were going to address. They felt like they owned that plan, and they produced. So sometimes it works.
I think one of the things that people kind of underrate is they forget that there's also outside factors that can impact how you sell. Maybe you're going through some stressful times. I'll give you an example. We had a rep at a company that I worked for I had a parent pass away, and they were dealing with all of the trust fund inheritance. They were like the person that was like the adult of their family dealing with all that stuff. And it led to them being really distracted for a couple months, having to do all that stuff. And it would slowly carve into their activity when they were doing stuff for outbound prospecting. They were having to cancel calls and reschedule, just stuff like that will happen. And it's temporary, but it's probably one of the biggest reasons that sales reps have an average tenure of 9 months at a company.
Well, I think that, yeah, it's the fault of the manager for not digging in. I mean, to your point, when I was going through a marriage dissolution, I was not at my best by any stretch of imagination. And I could tell that people could tell. And I thought, I was trying to be transparent about it. And, the CEO that I worked for, he actually was my next door neighbor, so he knew what was going on. But performance suffers. And so as a manager, you really need to understand these things. Again, you're not trying to become best friends with your sellers and people that work with you, but you need to understand what's driving, what's happening in their lives. And again, what is, in my experience, everybody has something that's important to them that they're trying to achieve in the position. And you just need to ask the questions and have the patience and find out what that is.
So we're gonna get to Rich Stone in a couple minutes too. So look forward to that. If you guys have questions, by the way, for Andy or Rich, you can ask them right in the chat or use the Q&A, and then we'll sneak them in. And I'll look like the person asking the question. I'm just kidding. I'll give you guys credit. But if you have any questions for them, just jump in and ask some questions too in the chat, and we'll ask them for you. Andy, one of the things that I think I wanted to ask you is you mentioned going to that team and putting everyone on a PIP. When you first join a team, how do you find those problems? Like, what are the things you look at? What data are you looking at? What information? What conversations do you have? How do you get a feel of like why everything's going to shit?
Well, obviously you look at the data, but most importantly, you got to talk to people. And for me, somebody told me years ago, and I thought it was a great piece of advice. He says, the solution to a sales problem is never found in the office. And that's absolutely true. So what I prioritize is talking to customers. Why did we win deals? Why did we lose deals? And really making sure we have a firm understanding of why things happened, and not just doing what our notes are in our CRM system or whatever. It's like actually talking to the customers and talking to prospects that we lost. And so spend a week or two setting up calls and have the calls set up that you're talking with the decision makers, the key stakeholders, and make sure you can really understand, okay, why did we win this deal? Why did we lose this deal? And get it from the horse's mouth.
Do you ever find teams that you've gone to like talk to and consult with or help with? Do they like blame other departments? Like, will they blame like product or marketing and stuff? Does that ever come up?
Constantly. Yeah. Constantly. I mean, it's the great thing about sellers is they try to deflect responsibility as much as they can. It's part of our makeup. But and that's where you really need, like in my work, when I work with a company or consultant, you really need to work for the CEO. And so that's always one of my rules is, I work for the CEO. So I'm not working for a CMO or a CRO. So I can sort of have the freedom to really trace the problems to the root. And I mean, we know when to align sales and marketing, we know when to align sales, marketing, customer service, customer success. There's still personalities. It's human business. Not everybody's going to get along. Those personal relationships can interfere with the smooth workings, even if people are trying to be professional. So you just have to do a little diagnostic on that. And what I like to do is usually within the first week is try to have about 15 to 20 conversations with various people throughout the organization, all levels of the organization, and just find out what's going on. And because I can tell you, somebody that goes in as a consultant, that's true when you come into a new company, even as a new CRO or something, you've had your conversations with the CEO, you've had the conversations with the board or whomever, and they will assure you that certain things aren't a problem, and you'll find out they most definitely are.
So you'll hear something like, what's an example of something? Let's say you talk to a rep or a director of sales and they give you something. What's something they might say that like you then hear the opposite from a different department? Like, do you have any examples of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it just has to do with the management they're getting, the support they're getting or not getting. And one example is we talk about coaching all the time in the sales world and the importance of coaching. There's always a huge gap between the perception of how much coaching an existing or previous manager had been given versus what people said they were receiving. And that's one. Another one is like just the depth of sort of intellectual rigor that companies apply to understanding why they win and why they lose. You can talk about one CEO here. I said you should really be doing deal reviews on the deals you won and lost. Oh, we do that. No, you don't. Well, we do. And we circled back and forth like little kids for about 2 minutes. It's like, let me assure you. And then, they weren't. And this is a problem that happens pretty frequently in business that I do, is that CEOs just assume these things are happening. They assume that best practices are being followed. And when you point out some very simple things that aren't occurring, the rest are stunned. And yeah, it just shows a level of detachment on some CEOs' part. They need to just be more intimately involved in really what's going on.
So we talked a little bit about, but before we jump in and kind of go into a little bit more of this, so we're talking about as a whole team struggling. When there's an individual rep struggling on your end, or when you go to a company, have you ever been to places where the closing process was good, but the prospecting process sucked, or vice versa?
No, I mean, they're so connected. I mean, it's I see this all the time, even SaaS companies today, is robust at the top of the funnel and the win rates suck. And that's sort of generally true across SaaS as an industry, in my mind. And so, yeah, if a lot of SaaS companies operate sort of 20% win rates, and I think that's bad. And it shouldn't be that low. I mean, if we can only close 1 of every 5 of our most qualified prospects, there's a problem in our process, there's a problem in our messaging, a problem in our product market fit somewhere that we should be able to diagnose and fix. But it's become accepted. This is sort of accepted practice. So because what happens is companies use LeadIQ and they're fantastic at the top of the funnel. But when it comes to executing deals throughout the rest of the funnel, we're not nearly as strong.
I love that you're pitching for us. Thanks.
Thanks for having me on.
Sponsored. Andy Paul sponsored. He just has a LeadIQ hat. He's like, I'm not going to. What are you talking about? They didn't give me any money. You're just holding money bags.
Yeah, you guys have such a big budget show.
We try.
Yeah. Well, hey, compared to mine, it's a very big budget. So
I think by the way, anyone listening should definitely check out your podcast. Can I be honest with you? This can be kind of awkward. I listen to your podcast in the shower.
Oh,
so
okay. Well, that's an image that I can't forget. Yeah,
I know. I obviously wear a shower cap to protect my hair, but I got my scruffy brush and I'm just listening. Seriously, it's a good little hack for people if you're listening, if you're trying to find some stuff like to get help on. Podcasts are a really good thing that you could do in your shower time. I think it's kind of a nice way to sneak it in.
Interesting.
Let's jump into let's get a little collab going here. This is like a rap album that's featuring a second artist. Everybody, this next person has had a rise to glory. I'm making it sound way more glorious. And climbed up the ladder at Tech Target for, I don't know how long you've been there, almost a decade or more, right? I mean, it's crazy. Everybody say hi to Rich Stone. What's up, Rich?
Hey, folks, what's going on? Thanks for having me.
I like the folks word. That sounds cool. So Andy said a bunch of stuff, Rich, as like kind of that outside consultant guy that comes in with the monocle and is super wise and stuff and can like shake trees. And he's also got the experience. You've been in all of it, like over the past decade with like being both an IC, moving into management, climbing up at Tech Target. What are some things that you've noticed when things aren't working? By the way, I just want to make it clear, if anyone hears stuff today, neither of you guys are like talking smack about your clients or stuff. It's just things you've heard from the space, obviously. Like, so anyway, I was just going to say, on your end, Rich, like, what are some things you've noticed when you see teams struggling with people you've been involved with?
Yeah, from what I've heard Andy say, that it's typically your fault when problems arise. So I want to hear this.
Yeah.
Well, they say the fish rots from the head down, so just FYI.
Yeah, I mean, Andy covered a lot of this too, but and John just said it kind of jokingly, but it's true. You have to take ownership of the situation, especially if you're in a leadership role. But if you're an IC, you still have to take that ownership and know that it's up to you at the end of the day. And so I think the first thing that's important is finding out what your why is, right? So if you're an individual contributor, what is your why? Andy said what motivates you earlier, right? That's important to understand. And if you're a leader, it's important to understand what motivates your people. And this is something I learned when I first got into leadership. Is my wife helped me figure this out. It's like not every person is going to be motivated by the same things that you're motivated as the sales leader, which I think is hard to grasp as an early sales leader, because you think everyone is going to kind of think like you or be motivated by the stuff that you're motivated by. But frankly, that is not the case at all. So you need to really understand what makes people tick. And to Andy's point earlier, you got to spend that one-on-one time getting to understand your people and what their why is, what they care about, what's most important to them in their lives, right? Not just in their day-to-day sales process. And once you have that foundation, just going from there and understanding exactly what that is, and then how to take that why and then factor in the daily things that person needs to do in order to become successful in the long run. And so at that point, it becomes less about that motivation, and then it becomes more about the daily discipline they need to take to accomplish the tasks they need to be doing to be successful. And so as a leader, you're putting those tasks out for them to hit and accomplish. And as an individual contributor, if you want to be excellent, it's about going above and beyond those tasks that are the bare minimum, and then making a daily task list for yourself, and then holding yourself accountable to hit those daily tasks on a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis. And if you do those things over a long period of time, you're going to be successful in sales, and you'll also be more fulfilled because you're putting that work in, and that, and that's really going to give you the feeling of accomplishment and then make you feel like you're fulfilled. And also you're going to be hitting your numbers as a byproduct of doing that.
I'm going to ask a hard-hitting question for both Andy and Rich here, and you guys could cross-talk and do whatever you want on this. Don't wait for me to call on you. If you both were running sales teams, which you kind of both are, you're doing like you've done or you have, would you avoid someone in an interview if you can't detect that they're motivated, or do you think it's up to the manager to figure that out? I'll let you guys go. I won't even go into it. Would you avoid if you talk to someone in an interview and you can't figure out what their why is? Would you avoid them?
Go ahead, Rich.
So in sales, I think you need to have some intrinsic motivation, and it doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be recognition, like is a typical kind of sales motivator. It has to be something. So I think that's important. And again, it doesn't have to be the traditional things in sales, like, hey, I want to make a ton of money. I want to be recognized. I want notoriety, that sort of thing. But it has to be something in order for you to be successful in sales. So I wouldn't say I would avoid that person, but I want to dig deeper and understand exactly. There has to be something that got them in that seat in the first place. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that. I think that at least for me personally is I wouldn't be able to connect to that person. Yeah, at some level, right? When we first started engaging and talking, it's like something would just be off if the person didn't have some form of motivation there, because we're sort of tuned to it at this point. I'm sure Rich is as well, and we just if that vibe is missing, and you do a little digging, as he said, that could be a very short interview.
You got to figure out a way to get out of it. Well, this has been great. I got to go.
Life is short. I mean, you want to be polite, but life is short. And if you got to cut it short, you cut it short. You just tell people it's not going to be a fit.
Yeah. So feeding off that, let's pretend we're going to kind of go more into the turnaround state now, as opposed to like the motivation state. Mm-hmm. Do you guys think at the core of every problem of a sales team, it's because of motivation, or could it be other stuff too? Like, what are some other things that you see that have been dysfunctional over the years that you guys have been able to fix? That's for both of you, I guess.
Poor process. I mean, for me, if we're doing one loss deal review, I go back to discovery. I can uncover most of the problems that end up in a no decision, specifically a no decision, but also a lost deal back at discovery. So oftentimes it's just going back and looking at what are people doing in that process. I mean, now we have the benefit of technology, be able to listen to discovery calls and be able to analyze them. But even before that is, sitting in on calls or doing ride-alongs, whatever, is, what happens is there's a tendency, and I've found, is that, especially it's become a little more pronounced now too, is we have playbooks, we've got lists of questions that typically we ask people to ask, and people are good at gathering information, but they're not terribly good at understanding that information, understanding the context and why that's important to the buyer, what it means in terms of what their desired outcomes are. And I find that's a big hole. So I tend to look starting with discovery, because I find that I find a lot of problems there.
Rich, what's the discovery process like at TechTarget? So let's say someone comes into the pipe. If you can give away trade secrets, if you can't, you can be like, not TechTarget, schmeck schmarget.
Yeah. So we have a very detailed set of ideal questions that we can gather information on a discovery call. And when we go through the discovery process, it's important to gather those things so you can navigate the sales process, as Andy said, effectively based off of the information you gather from that discovery. Now, the discovery isn't going to be the first call, you're asking 21 questions right out of the gate, you're checking a box and you're just, hey, what's your CRM? What's your marketing automation platform? What's your sales cadence? Like, we're not doing that. It's kind of like, we need to gather this information. And I like to coach our teams to be candid, and when they're discovering this information, and that let them know why we're doing it, right? We are gathering this information so that we can have a more productive conversation, and so that we can have a mutually beneficial outcome to this call and get that next call scheduled to go over a more detailed demo that's going to be pertinent to your specific environment, right? So that's something that's, I think, super important. So we literally have an actual checklist of good questions to ask, and more so specific answers that you're going to be looking for. So I think every team should have a very detailed discovery process, and like a wish list of things you can gather on that discovery call. But also, discovery doesn't stop at the initial call. Like, it's going to throughout the whole sales process, depending on how complex your sales cycle is. But these are things that you can continue to gather. And if we're talking about SaaS, when you're the rep and you're handing things over to the customer success organization after they've signed on for a subscription, like, you want to have these information points so that you can help with customer retention, usage, and then upsell renewal moving forward, to help have that relationship really be fostered, and ultimately not be that one deal, right? You want to grow the partnership. And so I think that discovery is something that will never stop and should never stop throughout the process.
Great point.
I have a little bit of a hot take here. I think one of the things that I've noticed from being so I get pitched a lot, obviously, at LeadIQ, because like I'm VP of marketing and stuff, and people are pitching us all the time for stuff. One of the things you are too, Mazza. You're always pitching me on things. You won't stop. One of the things that I've noticed is, I think a lot of the companies this is not me, I'm just making this a comparison. A lot of companies also don't think about the individual's motivation either. Like, especially in the United States. Like, I've talked about this in prospecting all the time. The average person that you sell to is going to be in a position for 18 months, and then they're going to change their job. So when you go into a sales meeting or a pitch meeting and all your discovery questions are about the company and not about that individual person, you're going to miss that chance to build a really good relationship with them early on, so that they're more transparent and comfortable with you. Like, if I asked you, Andy, like, I could ask you a question like, Andy, what are you trying to do this year? So, like, you're doing the podcast. What do you care about? Like, why are you working? What are you doing? You're successful. You don't need to work. You're distinguished. You have a cool beard.
You like that?
Yeah,
I have to keep on pain of divorce, but yes. Yeah, I sort of lost track of the
I wasn't actually asking you to put you on the spot, but I was just saying, when you're doing discovery, you should get into that a little bit. Like, I remember Rich and I did a prep call a couple weeks ago. Me, Rich, and Mazza were talking, and literally we just talked for like 20 minutes about what we care about, what we're trying to do with our lives. It was kind of cool. Like, go ahead.
I was going to say, to a point I think maybe Rich was making is that, everybody has a personal motivation and an organizational motivation, and you need to know both. And I wrote about this recently a couple weeks ago on LinkedIn, is if you have 6 stakeholders in a decision, you really have 12, because you need to understand why they think it's a good decision for the organization and why they think it's a good decision for them personally. And if there's too big of a disconnect between those two, among too many of the stakeholders, a decision's not going to happen. So you really need to understand both perspectives.
I totally hear you.
Oh, go ahead, Mazza. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, especially like when I was prospecting, especially if I could find those two motivations, the business motivation and the personal motivation, before I would, come up with an email or make a cold call. If I had those two in that email, or if I had those ready to go on that cold call, chances are, like, I was going to get that meeting. Like, it was almost.
Well, this is nothing new. I mean, Herbert Simon, who won a Nobel Prize for economics, wrote about this back, I think, in the 50s, early 60s, about this dual motivation, and everybody has them. So as a seller, you want to just be cognizant of the fact that, someone may think, and I've run into this, I'm sure everybody has, is somebody say, I think it'd be a good decision for the company. Yeah, for me, might change my job substantially. Maybe I'm not, thrilled about that, even though it'd be a good opportunity for the company. You need to know those things.
One thing I do want to ask on this end. So, Rich, you mentioned obviously the discovery part. When you guys pull people in, what about pulling in other people at the team? Like for Tech Target, for example, there literally are like, you guys probably deal with a ton of different decision makers, right? It's not just like demand gen and stuff. You deal with sales. Like, how do you get that? How do you get that mobilization?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that sales is a team sport. And so I heard this early on in my career, but it goes something like when you go to cash your commission check, the bank doesn't ask you like who else was involved in the sales process when you do that. And so as a young salesperson, I always appreciated that, because when you bring in other people, it just helps. One, it's funner because you get to be with your colleagues and experience the sales process together, but also you can leverage other people's strengths depending on the personas that you're selling into across the decision-making team. So to your point, Ryan, we sell to marketing folks, we sell to salespeople, we sell to operations people. We also help influence product-specific people. So depending on who you're working with, you have to leverage resources that you have at your fingertips in order to have a more effective conversation. So if you're not someone who's super technical, be very candid about that as a salesperson and say, hey, like, I'm a salesperson, like I understand this at a very surface level. That said, I'm going to bring in my sales engineer or my expert on this specific market in order to have a more informed discussion about this, and just be very open and transparent about that. And I think buyers appreciate that, because you get into trouble as a seller when you try to pretend that you're an expert on everything, because salespeople aren't. You're always going to have an area where you're out of your depth. And so I think just being honest about that, buyers really appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, you could have ended that sentence. Sellers get in trouble when they try to pretend. Because that's sort of the bottom line, whether it's their technical expertise or the experience they've had with similar type of customers. Yeah, customers don't expect you to be the font of all knowledge. As to Ryan's point, yeah, if you don't know something, best thing you can do is own up to it, and they'll appreciate it.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. I know everything.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You're not in sales, that's why.
Yeah.
We've been actually talking a lot about collaborative selling here at LeadIQ, and trying to be more collaborative on stuff, not just deeper in the funnel, but actually at the top of the funnel too. I'll give you an example. John Mazza is a big Boston Celtics fan, right? If you couldn't tell by the t-shirt, this was a plant, obviously, to set this up, right, Mazza?
Yes.
But if I actually like the Celtics too, but pretend I didn't for some reason, because I didn't grow up in the Boston area or something. If I'm actually prospecting into an account and the person that I want to get in touch with blatantly is tweeting out stuff about the Celtics and putting stuff out there on LinkedIn where they mention they like the Celtics and all this stuff, or referencing the Celtics in anything that they do, who do you actually think has a better shot at getting a response on a cold email? Me pretending to be a Celtics fan, or John Mazza, who actually is a Celtics fan and mentioning that in the email? That's a good way of thinking about collaborative selling too. It's not just taking expertise, knowledge, and insight and stuff that you might have in the industry. It's also taking things where you share common interest with someone and pulling that in. I think a lot of the toxic sales teams that we see that are like struggling and not hitting quota and dealing with the stuff, they'll get stuck in this idea that like, oh, well, we're competing with each other, I don't want to help you. But there's a ton of, you can help someone in one way and they can help you in another way afterward. Like there's a ton of team selling that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, I call that sales karma too. So even if you're not in a sales leadership position, if you help a team member, a colleague, someone in a different division, like that karma is going to come back to you down the road. And I'm a big believer in that. So the earlier on that you can realize that, I think the more successful you're going to be in the long run. So that's a great point.
Well, I think you can extend that to your buyers as well. I mean, sales fundamentally is a collaboration with the buyer. People think about we sell to someone. This is change the perspective. We don't sell. It's not something we do to somebody. It's something we do with them. And the more we're collaborative with the buyers, bring in the people from our team that can help them understand what their problem is and what the best solution would be for them. Yeah, they want to be they're part of the team too. We're talking about selling as a team effort. Buyers part of the team as well.
Yeah, I actually have a question from the audience too. This is from an anonymous attendee. I don't know if that's your name. What type of outreach sticks out to you? So I'll start off with Rich. We got a VP of sales here, so somebody I used to reach out to quite a bit. So what type of outreach sticks out to you?
Personalized outreach, one. So this is needless to be said, but don't make it generic. And there's a lot of information out there, right, given social media. So it's very rare where you can't find out something about somebody after doing 30 seconds of research. So there's no excuses to send out like generic outbound prospecting emails, right? So like I'm a big Celtics fan too. I put that out there during basketball season. Like that's an easy thing, right? Just as an example to go off the Celtics go seas. And then I like different vehicles that are outside the norm. So obviously email, right? Been around for a while. Phone, okay. I like people using video, using different vehicles. So like LinkedIn voicemail is something that people typically don't know anything about, but it's out there. So I use that quite a bit. And anytime I do, people every week be like, oh, I didn't even know this was a thing. And so people appreciate that. So, I mean, just mix it up. And I think Mazza, you said this earlier, it's like, if you're having fun doing what you're doing, prospecting, keep doing it. And then when you stop having fun, change it up and do something else. And I think that's also a good indicator for the buyers because there is SDR fatigue. And I was reading about this earlier because buyers are inundated with SDR outreach every single day. I mean, Ryan, you're a VP of marketing. You probably get hundreds of prospecting emails every day, right? So in order for you as a buyer to separate yourself from the noise, you need to do something different. So find that next vehicle and try it out, test it out, have fun, video, voice recordings, Mazza, the videos you're doing, those are next level. I mean, you're going to get meetings from those videos and yeah, did it take more time? Yes, but that investment is certainly worth it. So, I mean, just mix it up.
Kudos, by the way.
I agree. I think, thoughtful outreach that's distinct is really important. And to Rich's point, it doesn't take that much time to do it. And yeah, LinkedIn Voice is a great example. You could sit on your phone, you could send a number of those very quickly. And I guarantee people are going to respond to them because it's new and unique and it's very personal.
I was just going to say kudos to you on that, Rich. Like that's a good point on the personalization front. One thing I want to also, I think one of the habits we get into that makes teams struggle too is when you join a sales org, what's the first thing you usually do? You go look at what are people doing in cold emailing? What are they saying on cold calls? You listen to sales calls and say, what are they doing? But a lot of the time, as organizations grow and change, what works for that rep might not work for you. Like that, like I know it's like you want to build a standardized process so you can track stuff and do things a certain way, but you're kind of a differentiator yourself when you're doing your prospecting. And if you're in a rut, that actually happened to me. When I first became a BDR many years ago, like over a decade ago, I was struggling my first couple months. And I remember my chief revenue officer sat me down, Kyle York, and said, Ryan, I hired you to be you, not be these other guys. What I was doing is I was looking at what emails they were writing and copying their style and stuff, and it was completely wrong. And I was blowing opportunities by not being myself in the outreach that I was doing.
Yeah, that's what I said before. Don't pretend.
Yeah, be authentic. That's important in sales and in life. So do that and you'll typically have a good outcome.
So we've talked about identifying problems. We've talked about fixing and turning around sales teams a little bit by finding that motivation and stuff. We talked about aligning departments and fixing some stuff in process. One thing I wanted to ask you guys about is, I think this is great for both of you because one of you is actively in that VP role and the other person's like involved in sales enablement with your podcast and stuff. How much is time management a factor in performance of sales teams?
At the individual level?
Yeah, let's start there and we can kind of work our way up. But let's start on the IC level. How much do you see time management being a problem when teams are struggling?
Go ahead, Rich.
I'd say every single time. So I think that's one of the most important things. And you don't have to be talented or skilled to do that, but it's probably the hardest thing to master. So I think this is quite literally, I think if you can master the tasks that you need to accomplish on a daily basis, and you accomplish them regardless of what else is going on, and you do that with discipline, you will be successful, period. So I think having the time management skills to block off time to do those tasks that you need to accomplish daily to hit your goals, I think doing so on a consistent basis is essentially all you really need to do to be successful. And you pair that with having a positive attitude and outlook. I mean, that's what a successful sales rep looks like to me. It's pretty simple.
Well, on the sales and enablement side, Andy, from the people you talk to and stuff, how much are you guys cognizant of how reps are spending their time?
It's not a topic we've talked a lot about on the show, but to Rich's point, when you're in the trenches, it's everything. And there's sort of some basics, right? He laid the basics, and if he said you pair that with a positive attitude, I would add the ability to connect with a human being, to be curious, just some of the basic human skills. Yeah, sales is pretty simple when you look at it from that perspective. So I think he was right on.
So we have another question from our audience, and I think it kind of leads into this, what we were just talking about. Samantha Jones, being unique in a sales approach takes more time, which is true. When sales leaders place quotas for outreach, it can restrict creativity. Thoughts? So basically like activity goals. If you have high activity goals, what do you guys think about that?
Well, you've got to perform, but I think sellers and ICs have a responsibility to become the best version of themselves. Otherwise, they're going to have a pretty short career. And so, that's a goal you never reach, obviously, but you keep evolving to get good at what you're doing. And it has to be something that is unique to you. I think that I think we try to be take too blanket of approach in how we train and enable sellers. Because if we've got 5 million B2B sellers in the United States, there's 5 million different ways to sell. And just because everybody's a human, they're unique in the way they do it. So to Samantha's point, it takes more time. Well, maybe initially, you're starting to learn, but I encourage people, and this is again something I've written about recently, is you need to document somewhere on your own, whether it's an Evernote or whatever note-taking app you use, is how do you succeed? What are you doing that helps you win deals? What are you doing that helps you connect with a customer? And not just sort of think about it, write it down, right? And keep updating it. I call it write your own sales book, right? Write the sales book of you, and be very deliberate about that and understand what works. And it'll be different than everybody else, and that's fine. Sometimes you got to push back. I was notorious in my career for pushing back against processes and so on, because I thought, my butt was on the line, not the managers. And so they could tell me what to do, but if I took their advice and it was wrong and I failed, then I was going to get fired, not them. So, I tend to push back. I wanted to know why. Why was this going to work? So I spent a lot of time analyzing what I was doing and what was effective and what wasn't effective, and sort of, hey, this is what worked for me. Yeah, maybe it took a little more time, but it set a foundation for me throughout my entire career that, if I took this analytical approach and understood what was working, my odds of succeeding went up.
Just make sure you can back it up.
You just have to back it up with performance. And so, but you're doing that anyway. You're showing up on the job every day in this role and saying, look, I'm going to be accountable for these results. Well, if that's the case, sometimes you got to push back and say, I think there's a better way for me to do it. And I'm going to take the risk that, hey, I can make that work.
Rich, would you be mad at one of your reps if they're hitting quota and they didn't hit their activity goal every day?
So this is a great point Samantha makes, right? It's more about, you don't want to ever sacrifice the quality for quantity. So it's about outcome, right? So in the meaningful activities that are going to produce successful outcomes, right? So you can say to your reps, hey, I want you to make 100 dials a day and send 100 emails a day, right? In reality, those calls and emails probably aren't going to be super high quality. So I think it's more important to focus on the outcome and knowing what meaningful activities are going to get you better conversion rates. And so taking that same amount of time to create personalized outreach, I think is more effective. And I really like putting KPIs around the outcome versus the front end metrics. Now, I think what will separate you from an average individual contributor is doing both. Now, you're just going to have to work harder, which a lot of people don't want to hear that. But if you really want to be excellent, you hit the metrics that your sales leadership puts forth, and then you go above and beyond. You do it in a quality way so that it's more effective. And again, every sales org is going to be different. As long as they're attainable and not absolutely ridiculous, I think that's something that you should strive for. But to Andy's point, like if it's not realistic and you can't possibly do the outreach in an effective manner, like, yeah, that's where you start asking questions and hey, do we care more about actual meetings that will convert, or do we care more about the front end activity metrics, right? So I think that's an important point to make.
If before we do have another question Maz is going to read to us in a second, but before we jump into that, I just want to add one more thing too. If you are in a position where you cannot do personalization or quality on the outreach that you're doing, there also might be some efficiency things that you could fix on your sales team too, so that you have that time. And it could be automating some things that are manual that you're spending time on. It might be getting some training from your sales enablement team on like, what do I look for on a LinkedIn profile to find personalization really quick? One trick that everyone here has probably heard this 100 times if you follow LeadIQ, but one thing that we always recommend people do is a thing we call the 10-minute game, where you set a timer for 10 minutes and you have 10 minutes to basically go to find a prospect online, research them, and do an activity. And if you do that, you personalize your outreach, you do 6 an hour, you end up doing 30 personalized emails a day. What will happen is you'll slowly get better because of that timer. You don't allow outside things to distract you in that 10-minute window. It'll eventually turn into an 8-minute game, then a 5-minute game. And before long, it'll only take you 30 seconds to go find something that you want to personalize when you're doing your outreach on that stuff. It's a little training tip that we recommend. Mazza, what's the question that we got cooking?
I love this question. It's from Abigail Conrad. How do you stay positive, or how can you stay positive when you're suffering in your performance? And let's go to Rich for this question. This is a tough one.
Yeah. So your job is not the end all be all, right? So this goes back to understanding what your why and having gratitude for things that are outside of what you're doing at work. So if you're healthy, these are things that you're appreciative of. And so go back to those things and understand what's most important in life, and then focus on that and find that gratitude, and then understand that that's what's most important. And then from there, use that motivation and gratitude to change your mindset. You're never gonna always be positive, always be fired up, always be ready to get after it, always be smiling. Like that's not possible. I don't care how positive of a person you are. I'm a very positive person, and like I have days all the time where I'm not feeling it. Now, on those days, you need to revert back to the discipline and your why and understand, hey, these are the things that are most important. And you can also reset yourself. So things I like to do: go outside, go for a walk in the woods, go hiking, go for a swim, exercise, right? Meditate, do yoga, whatever you want to do. Go back to those things that bring you joy and reset, and then go back and attack and have that positivity. And because sometimes you're going to need an attitude adjustment, and you need to know yourself enough to put those things into practice in order to reset where you need to be in order to navigate your day-to-day and be successful.
Yeah, great answer. I mean, I love this quote. I found this quote from an American philosopher named Paul Tillich very early in my career, and it's really held me in good stead. And it's about keeping things in perspective. And the quote from Tillich is, "The awareness of the ambiguity of one's highest achievements as well as one's deepest failures is a definite symptom of maturity." And that's the mindset you need to keep in mind in sales. Is you're gonna have highs, you're gonna have lows. They don't define who you are as a person. And just use that as your watchword. And then when you're feeling stressed, as Rich said, go take a walk, go for a swim, go for a bike ride, reset.
Don't forget to take time off too. If it's summertime and you are not taking some time off, sometimes just taking a day and literally unplugging is the best thing you could do.
And the key word there, unplugging, is go on a digital diet for a day.
I'm not trying to scare people, but another thing is sometimes if you find yourself having trouble staying happy at a place, might also just be time to start looking for another job. Like maybe you've run your course there, unfortunately. Like talk to your manager and be transparent. Don't hide stuff. Like tell them what you're going through and maybe they can figure out a way to help you and make it work. I know for a fact that Mazza hates me and has literally been looking for a job every day since he started working for me.
I think it's a fair point, though. I think that as employers, especially in the startup world, we tend to look for like managers in certain niches, right? This is the person who's going to take us from 5 to 50, or this person who's takes us from 50 to 100. We slot people. Well, as a seller, you have to look at your career the same way as what am I in this job for, right? Is it really, am I going to make a career? I mean, Rich is very unusual being in one place 10 years, right? Is this a career, or what am I trying to accomplish in this role? And oftentimes, I think people, when they feel a little burnt out, is you got everything you could out of that role. Find something new.
Rich has been there for I think over 13 years now. That's crazy. By the way, that's awesome. Rich, how do you probably at some point have had employees that work for you come up and say, hey, kind of not happy completely. You figured that out, right? You work on it with them?
Yeah. I mean, you have to have an honest conversation, and you think about it from, it's really a personal perspective too. You have to sometimes you have to separate yourself from the employee-employer relationship, depending on how that person is doing. And if they're really struggling and maybe it's time to help them find their next thing, you definitely have to be able to, identify that and then move forward so that's a mutually beneficial outcome. Because if someone is truly not happy in what they're doing, it's not good for the employee and it's not good for the business. So I think it's important to be able to identify that earlier rather than letting it drag on and just having honest conversations. So I think transparency is very important on both sides. So you want to have your reps feel comfortable being able to come to you with things. So just fostering that environment so that the reps don't feel like they have to hide things from you, so that you are surprised by people leaving or taking another job or that sort of thing. So just have that one-on-one relationship and be open to having that conversation.
I was talking to Richard Harris once about how to do one-on-ones with your reps. We did something for Tenbound a couple of years ago where we talked about this. And one of the things that he said that I thought was really interesting is you'll see reps actually go talk to each other and create kind of a toxic sales environment because they complain to that person, but they don't complain to the manager. If you're a rep, you have a way better chance of changing things if you just talk to your manager. Just be open about it and talk about it. We are wrapping up now. We're up at time a little bit. So I do want to give you guys a chance to plug things if you want. What do you guys want to plug? Is Tech Target hiring at all? Richard, you got anything cooking?
Yeah. We're always hiring. We're always looking for motivated individuals. So if anyone is interested in cutting their teeth in an entry-level sales position, let me know. Our BDR team is based in Newton, Massachusetts in North America, and then in London, UK for EMEA, and then both Sydney and Singapore for Asia Pacific. So if you're looking to cut your teeth in an entry-level sales position, please let me know and we'll get you plugged in.
Cool. Go check out Rich Stone. You can find him on LinkedIn. Hit him up on Tech Target. Andy, what do you got cooking?
Well, listen to my podcast. I mean, it's not as fancy as this one, but we have a few episodes out there. So that's Sales Enablement with Andy Paul podcast. And got a new book coming out next year. Maybe you'll have me back on in a few months. We'll talk about that.
Well, we can have you back. We definitely will. All right. Well, thank you guys. Mazza, what do you want to plug besides me in the face with a fist?
That's why that's
rooms.
Pretty much it.
Yeah, we're in separate rooms. It's bad blood. Everyone's witnessing the feud. Well, I just want to give a special shout out to everybody that came today. Thank you guys for attending. Recording will be sent out Friday, probably. I think we're looking at Friday. Next week, we're going to be doing a really cool webinar with on what to do if you want to prospect someone and you can't use the phone for some reason. We're going to talk about some creative ways you could do some stuff there. You should check that out. If you're looking for it, look on our LinkedIn feed. We'll be plugging that next week. Outside of that, thank you guys. Thank you again for coming on. Apply for jobs at Tech Target. Go listen to Andy's podcast. We're out. We'll talk to you guys later. Thank you.
Peace out, everybody.
Now it's